Sitting at his feet is the title of it. So just as a recap, because I know not everybody has been there from the first one, but this is really just a continuation of what we started at the beginning of the year in the adult Bible class, and just wanted to kind of reinforce with different, with all of these individual sections. So as it goes along, every year we will have a group of people that would be, a part of a different milestone, so to speak. So I think I did the zeros and the ones. I think Deaconess Kim's done maybe the 1-year-old program or something like that, and then we've got another one coming up. I think we got like 3 coming up this particular month, so that's probably what's been the most confusing, because we had a mom's group, and then we also had what would be in the mom's group. They had a meeting and that kind of thing too. So hopefully, once we get rolling with this, it'll be a little bit more, okay, this is just my age group, this is how it's going. And the hopes, and dreams of it is that we, again, form connections within those age groups. As the kids are growing up, they're involved in activities at church, they're involved in, other aspects of things that you would normally be involved in at church. So when we get into our smaller groups, we would do a little bit more meet and greet time. This had an activity with marshmallows, and as much as fun as it sounded, it was like sticks and marshmallows and all that kind of stuff. It's like team building kind of things. I thought, well, that'd be kind of fun, but I'll maybe leave that to next year's 5th graders to kind of do that. So not that I'm opposed to marshmallows, but I think I prefer those around a campfire stuck on a stick getting nice and warm. So, but maybe we could do that sometime too for one of the activities or something like that. So this is something that's not really been really new to the church. I mean, I guess technically it would be, but in the last 20 to 30 years, there's been a big emphasis from some within our church body that we need to bring the faith formation back into the homes, because that's where God intended it to be, and it's also proven that when you skip that step, we bought into, like many of the other churches in America, where we're like the experts in training of the faith. Your job is to bring them here, and we'll work our magic, and then we'll turn them loose. And we realize that that's not the right pattern. So we want to make that correction, make that change, and help be a little bit more responsible in regard to being the ones that are walking with you through the process. So we don't want you to feel like you're going it alone, but we just feel like it's a more beneficial thing for us to be walking through this program with you and giving you guys the tools and the stuff that you need to have to kind of do this, to get this going too. So I'm glad that Jim showed up tonight. We accidentally scheduled this meeting on the high school gathering meeting, so that's why we have a couple of high schoolers probably showed up without their parents. But that's okay. You guys take good notes and bring them back to your parents. All right? Okay, they're petrified because they're like, pastor's saying something to me and I don't know what to do now. That's okay. So what we're finding, this particular section is all about finding mentors, getting mentors for your kids, these types of things. This all happens naturally anyway. Your kids probably have adults that they look up to. There may be adults that are already here at church that they look forward to seeing on Sunday morning. Something along the lines of this. It could be an uncle, could be an aunt. I know in my own life, I had 2 sponsors. One was an alcoholic, and the other one was a Jesus-aholic. So pretty good combination there. Although I come to find out my uncle was also very spiritual too. So he would always go to church. He made sure my grandma and grandpa got to church. That type of thing. So it's just these kind of things that are pretty influential in your life. You have these things that automatically, naturally take place. And so what we're urging, or at least encouraging, is that you really dive into this idea and be intentional about how you're making these particular connections with the different family members or friends or what have you that are at church. Okay, so any questions up to this point? Ideally, the church, you're going to hear some videos and they're going to talk about some statistics and those types of things. Our church body has just got done doing the same thing. That's really why I've decided that I really wanted to emphasize this going forward, and really started in the beginning of the pandemic is where really started digging back into it and getting the resources. I'm not alone. The Missouri District is really behind this stuff. Again, there's several organizations that are still, banging the gong for making this happen. So I just want to dive into it. Don't want to let the go of this and just kind of keep putting the, pedal to the metal on this. They ideally say that if you have at least five, that statistically increases your chances that your child will stay in the faith. 5 influential spiritual people in their lives is crucial. This comes from, several different resources that are out there. I do know some of you maybe know Selena Speaks. I know she did this with her kids intentionally, but others have done it unintentionally. It just tends to happen. So maybe if you guys remember, Rich Hill used to be pretty active and involved in the youth that were here. Jim's kind of stepped into his footsteps there. Although you were connected with the middle school youth while Rich was still here, which is good that you're following through with them in high school and stuff like that too. That helps to strengthen those types of things. I know, like, my kids would feel comfortable going to talk to him. I remember hearing things from Rich in that regard that, kids will be very vulnerable with that adult that they trust. If you pay attention to the prayer line, you see Jim throws time to time some kids that are dealing with some really heavy stuff. Now, they're not in our church. Some of them flock to him from his school. He's a middle school teacher too. But you see, we want to create some place that's safe for them, where they can ask whatever questions they want, and they're not going to feel like they're getting, shunned or turned away or anything along the lines of that. So it's just these really good, trusting relationships, building these relationships where they feel safe to ask questions and ideas that they're struggling with. Because they're all going to do it. I mean, we all had those same things growing up too. We're going to hear a couple of comments just about how, the world is different, how maybe not necessarily within our own families, but in other families, we're asking kids, putting a lot more on kids than what we've ever put on them before, and that's just not real healthy. And if you're not convinced of that, I can have Shelly come maybe lead a little bit of it too, right? So she deals with that in counseling too. And again, if you guys have anything to add to this, let me know, because I appreciate being willing to be a part of this with our other kids' lives in this place too. And so St. Stephen's always been very strong in that area, so we'll hopefully keep going with that. So, all right, any questions at that point? Okay, I'll just kind of keep going down the line here. So the church partnering with you to make Jesus the center, with you to make Jesus the center of your home. So, you're hearing a lot about devotion talk, some talking about God and home family regularly. That's what we're kind of trying to encourage, that you take those moments to be able to bring that into their lives. And sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's not. Joey's back in the house again, so we tend to have some real deep theological discussions at times, and he's real helpful actually in helping me to understand, what people are thinking today, especially from a youth perspective. But it's still even amazing the difference between his age group and Elizabeth, my youngest daughter's age group, because there's this magic thing in 2006 that turned, social media, and this is ruining kids. This is ruining kids. Okay, so you gotta protect them a little bit more from those types of things. Know what's on your kids' phones. Limit the time that they're on their phones. That's the best thing you can do, because this causes so much stress and anxiety on there. Because think about that when you were growing up. You went to school and you're embarrassed middle schooler, and then you were waiting for that last bell to ring of the day, and then you got to go home and you have to deal with anything until the next morning when you started again. It's not like that anymore. It's not like that. You got to give kids a break from that sort of thing. So thank you for offering that advice to throw that into here too. So, all right. Others, how God is at work in your life. That's important for us to kind of tell these stories. Tell these stories that are there. And it's good to even be vulnerable. I know like in the sermons I've used time and time again that, I'd be like traveling home in a blizzard. We were at a basketball game in Sioux Falls, and so inside Sioux Falls things were fine, but you get out to the country, all of a sudden you're in a blizzard, and you're like, well, what do you do? And then your daughter says, why don't we pray, Dad? It's like, I should be saying that to you, but, that kind of encouragement is there. So these are good things. So, all right. And others, how faith is lived out. So again, these are where your mentors can be perhaps helpful for some kids. And, we do have probably a collection of people that have experienced, difficult things in their lives. And how did they deal with that? How did that make a difference in their lives? How do you get through certain things that are going on in your lives? So, all right, any questions about that so far? Okay, so let's build the case a little bit for what we're talking about when it comes to this mentoring thing.
So this is a broad question, a very general question in that many 20-somethings leave for many different reasons. So it's very difficult to answer this question in a succinct manner and just, one or two bullet points. So let me just try to kind of address some of the trends that might be happening from our perspective. I think that some of our thoughts on this probably are less about their 20-somethings as much as kind of what happened a decade earlier, even 2 decades earlier, and in their relationships that are formulating within the church. Outside of their friend group, it's usually just one person, a youth minister or youth leader, that they have built kind of deep relationships with. And I think that even a book that was referenced to us in raising our children was a book called Sticky Faith that talks about this idea of needing to have a constellation, like 3 to 5 other mentors outside of parents, to really begin to speak into that. And it's not only that book, but Michael Lindsay's book, A View from the Top. It's a book on leaders and how they're developed. And in that, he talks about the need for organic relationships, not just institutional mentoring or structural mentoring, but the need for real, authentic, and organic relationships. And the best institutions and the best churches, I would add, create opportunities for those organic relationships in an ecosystem of relationships. And so when you have 3 to 5 to 10 folks that really know you in your teens, when it comes to your 20s, I think there's a less of a likelihood to just be simply leaving. But if it's just 1 or 2, a pastor, a youth pastor, and they're gone by the time that you're into your 20s, I think that is inevitable at some level. The other trend that you can see is just the lack of real gospel authenticity. I think that we've created a culture in which celebrity Christianity is king, and to be strong and to have it put together and to have incredible gifts of speaking or whatever's on the surface has been kind of is what it looks like to be really a follower of Christ. And unintentionally, we have not proclaimed a gospel of weakness, a gospel of authenticity, the gospel of brokenness. And I think with that, when 20-somethings begin to see that in the real world, if you would, and they don't see an answer coming from the church, that there's a divide that happens that ends up, guiding them away, if you would.
Yeah, and I think I would add the idea of content and context. A lot of churches are really great at offering content and maybe systems or structures, like you said. This is our women's Bible study, or this is our track. And I think this generation is really looking for, not to lose the content, but the context is incredibly significant, and it needs to be safe, and it needs to be authentic, and it needs to be relational, like you said, relationship. And I think we've really moved towards a lot of church systems and programs, and what they really need are people in their lives and living out that content, not just talking about it. And so I think the onus is on us as the church to adorn our doctrine. I think we've done a really good job declaring our doctrine before the world, and I think to adorn it, to live it out, to show them that there's substance underneath the flash, that we're not just saying it, but it's really changing our lives. It's vitally important to our lives, and therefore it can vitally impact theirs. And then the other thing I would say is ownership. I think that in part of our pandering, maybe in trying to mimic the culture as the church, we've created this very consumeristic model of Christianity. And so come and have this great experience, and we're going to have great branding and great music and great snacks and great coffee and all great things. And they're getting a great experience, but they're not part of it. They're coming to receive. And I think that this generation, this upcoming generation, really wants to have their hands to the plow. They want to roll up their sleeves, and they want to get to work, and they want to be part of owning something. And I think we haven't done a great job of giving them a seat at the table. They want to know that they are part of shaping something that's real. And I fear that they think if I don't show up, it doesn't matter. It doesn't leave a hole in this place. And not that they are the center of it, but they have a significant part to play in the kingdom going forward. And I think allowing that next generation a seat at the table, not to take over and completely control, but beginning to kind of posture them for leadership and to hear what they have to say, to hear their insights from the younger generation rather than just kind of decry it as, oh, you're just a millennial. Or I think a mutuality and a reciprocity of relationships between the older generations and the younger generations is very New Testament. I think the church seems to thrive when both of those things are present and both have something to receive from the relationship.
All right. Again, I'll shoot you guys this particular document once my computer gets back healthy. I'll shoot you guys this so you'll have all the links that are there, and you can make those connections that way. So one other thing is, like, for example, I'm on point 4 now, legacy point 1. What is a disciple? The original language, the Greek word is, and that's supposed to be a Greek word, but this computer doesn't read Greek, so you got a translation that doesn't make much sense, but it's basically Matthias, which means to learn, right? A learner. What's a disciple is a learner. So we've been talking a lot about discipleship here at St. Stephen, and so we've thrown quite a few different terms and terminologies out there. So, like, for example, in our discipleship journey, that we've defined a disciple as somebody that takes up Christ's teachings and teaches somebody else to do the same thing. Now, in the discipleship journey, I think in our book, one of the weaknesses I would say with that particular thing is that it really focuses more on a non-believer, like your job of witnessing to a non-believer. What I really am hoping that we get going, especially with this new guidance statement that we're working on, is to really make a Team Jesus discipleship journey itself, of our own. And what I hope to emphasize first and foremost, especially for you folks that are sitting in this room, is you're discipling your family first, right? I mean, discipleship means I'm growing in my own walk with the Lord, I'm growing in my relationship with my wife, and I'm growing in my relationship with my kids, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So for many of us, that's enough to work on. I remember, 5 kids in the house. One point we had 4 under 4. That's a lot of diaper changing, right? So it's like you're not really out to change your world, but God has given you already everything that He wants you to be focusing on at this time. So just focus on those sort of things. So I think that that's kind of hopefully an important thing. And again, we're here to help you walk with that. So Great Commission, that's Matthew 28:18-20. And Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. And again, in an evangelical world, we tend to head knowledge this and not put it so much into practice. Yes, some of us maybe will become missionaries to the world, right? And go someplace in a foreign land and make a difference for Jesus. But for most of us, it's just in our household, right? It's in our church. It's in our communities that we, have. It can be caring for those in our soccer group or clubs or whatever those things may be. Usually, God gives you an opportunity to be able to share your faith, to show compassion, to show mercy, just within the groups that you're going to naturally find yourselves in. So that's why I said we're hoping that every age group, we have somewhat of a connection with each other. Deaconess Kim and I can do this orientation thing. Hopefully we've developed a stage where, one or two parents will take up and, get each other together a little more frequently, whether it's an activity or something like that. All right, any questions on that? All right, the Luke passage, Luke 10, 38, it's on your sheet. Now as they went on their way, Jesus entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her house, and she had a sister Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teachings. But Martha was distracted with much serving, and she went up to him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her then to help me. But the Lord answered, Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken away from her. All right, so, just a simple question. How did Jesus disciple his disciples? How did Jesus work on that? One of the interesting things that I thought from our discipleship journey training thing was that Jesus really had an inner core of 3 people: Peter, James, and John. He had 12 disciples, but his 3 that he focused in on was just those 3. And then he had the 12, yes, but these systems that he was setting up were stemming from those types of settings. So when we think of discipling, we cannot disciple the world. That's just impossible for us to be able to do that. So we need to think in terms of what is in our realm, what is in our control, what has God given us to do. And like Jesus was saying, what's the most important thing for us to do right now is to disciple our kids. Now I get it. Some of us feel like, wow, this is really tough stuff. How do I pull this off? Well, hopefully we're walking through this together and we understand and try to make this a little bit more little less difficult or mind-boggling, because you guys are actually really good at mentoring. You really are. You all raise your kids. You're good at getting them to brush their teeth, hopefully. You're good at getting them to do whatever it is that you're supposed to do. You're good at getting them to disciple at something. So, all right. Discipleship defined, I'm on E now, it's on the next page. One who sits at someone else's feet, following them, learning from them, growing to be more like them. So who or what in your life are you a disciple of? So I think this is just trying to kind of really, I guess it's a repeat of the sermon this morning, right? Where is your heart at? Where is your heart? That tells you where, what your focus is in that regard. But again, we're primarily talking about our family units as being the main thing that we're worried about in discipleship right now.
I'm convinced that we don't have a disciple-making problem at all. We have plenty of people who are making disciples who make disciples. I live in a town where there's plenty of boys who grow up without a dad and learn how to realize that men should not take responsibility for their home, and so they go and repeat it, and it's gone to the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th generations. We have plenty of disciple makers. The question is, what are we making disciples of? That's the question. You all are disciple makers. You will make disciples. You will make them to the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th generation. Every one of you, because that's how the world works. It's how God designed things to work. We learn from the imitation. We follow the example of others. We then repeat it and teach others to do the same. So the question that I think we need to ask not only is how, which has been great and you received a lot of that, but what? What are we making disciples of? We're making them of Jesus. We know that. But my concern is sometimes what we've done in our disciple-making work is we've primarily made it a cognitive reality. We're going to teach them the truths about God so that they can tell others the truths about God. Now, we need that. We have to have our heads transformed. We're transformed by the renewing of our minds. We need new thoughts about God, so I don't want to discount that. But there's another side of it. Some people go away from cognitive understanding. They move to practical living. So they say, well, the word disciple leads us to think discipline. So if we just get people to do the spiritual disciplines, then they'll be disciples. And so we measure people in accordance to how they're doing with the spiritual disciplines. Do they read their Bible? Do they pray? Do they go to church? Do they give? If they're really serious, they fast. and some meditate when they fast, and some meditate on food too much when they're fasting, but they're meditating. And so we say they need to do the disciplines, and I'm not against those. Please don't misunderstand me. But the Pharisees were amazing at the disciplines, and yet they failed to come to Jesus. So the point of the disciplines are not that they would do them, but that the disciplines would remove any barrier that's in our life that would keep us from coming to Christ. That's the point of the disciplines. We're dying to ourselves. We're putting our hope in someone else. We're having our minds renewed as we read the Word so that all that is keeping us from Jesus gets stripped away. The point of making disciples, according to Jesus, is we're making disciples of Jesus.
I think we're catching on to that. We good? All right. So the next thing that we're going to move on to is gathering and scatter, right? Gather and scatter. This is one of the videos that we use a lot in the discipleship journey training too, and just getting us to understand what it is that we need to be focused on. One of the articles, or one of the previous videos, he kind of talked about that we sort of have this image of the celebrity, the celebrity Christian. We were talking about that in Bible class today, where somebody was kind of saying, we have public sins that are out there, even within our congregation that's out there, and it's just like, well, what do you do? And it's like, okay, if we start throwing all the sinners out of the church, I said, probably not going to have a pastor anymore. So it's like, hate to break it to you guys, I deal with sin too. I have the same struggles as everybody else does. We're very much human, right? So we can't have this purple palace mentality of what the church is all about in that regard. So I think this next video, it talks a little bit about what our discipleship journey is and how we're getting this, and it's really getting us back into this idea that it's more relational than what it's ever been. This attractional model that we think is so groovy is, I think we talked about, was it Life Church? Is that new one that's over on 435, right? They have 41 different places they go. And so Barry was talking about that today, that it was like they're trying to pump up for the Super Bowl, because if they've got something or a right plan, they'll get money that'll come funneled into them to help and promote their kind of stuff. And it's just like, you hear what that is? That's like a business model. 41, you're like a McDonald's of churches. And this isn't really what we're about. That previous guy was talking about that too, is that we got to be intentional living our life for Christ in the things that we're doing. All right. So hopefully this next video is a little bit, you may have seen it before. I'm not even going to try to see if the link will go. I'll just copy the hyperlink and try to figure. But this just kind of gives us a little different way of looking at church, because we still have a lot of the attractional model kind of concepts that are there. think some of you have seen that before, perhaps? Yeah. Again, it just in the connection of just trying to understand this as I kind of talked about Life Church, but, those were the models, those are the models, and I think the attractional model is losing its ground just because all that's doing is you're taking Christians from one place and moving them to another. Do you understand? There's not like real growth going on, because real growth comes like what we were talking here, where you disciple another, you mentor another, and that person follows you where you go. And just a real quick thing, because like I said, I've been, was with my discipleship training that I was doing with Terry Tiemann and another group, this Yin Kai, this guy that's actually one of the foundation principles behind this, when they build this understanding, you can get a church in 10 years to average 1,000 people in worship. So you got to think to yourself, is that a goal, right? Is the goal that we have 1,000 members in church? And so the way to achieve that, and again, like I say, I use them as examples, if they have 41 that are working that way, you spend $20 million over the next 10 years and you can establish something like that. Because then you have the money, that's being generated into programs and all the stuff that would attract people. Now, we just got through a budget meeting. Do you think we're going to spend $20 million on this over the next? Probably not going to happen. Yeah, probably not going to happen. So you got to understand that. Now, Yin Kai, when he was going into China, and this would be the Yellow River Valley, I think it is. Maybe I've got the name. No, the Pearl River Valley. And he was thinking in these terms of, he's by all standards was a great church model kind of guy. You give him a year, this guy could have a church of about 300 people, worshiping on a regular basis. He said, I'm going into an area, and you're talking China, right? Going into an area that has 40 million people living in this area. What difference does 300 make? You see what I mean? It's just like, this isn't making any kind of difference. And so that's where he was kind of getting back to this discipleshiping movement, in the sense that you are working on one at a time. And you guys all know how things work when it's like 1 becomes 2, becomes 4, becomes 8. It just explodes. And now in that particular area, they spent like $100,000 in the area, and they have like 400 house churches going on, and you're talking millions of people that are following Christ in China. In China. This is not like, someplace that doesn't not persecute Christians. So just kind of trying to get your eyes or your minds wrapped around this. Even in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, if we lost no members, if we just had and kept all of our kids, we would be growing if we could just do that. And so this is the mentality I think that we want to think about when we're discipling and training kids up in the way they should go. All right, so any questions on that sort of thing? I mean, I'm going to skip through these a little bit quickly. This one's kind of funny, the how not to make disciples. We'll do the Chan. Some people like this guy. He's kind of an interesting character because he used to be in one of those mega churches. Well, I should say he started one of those mega churches and then kind of walked away from it because he wasn't feeling like it was real. You know what I mean? No depth. So
when I was a kid, we used to play this game called Simon Says. All right, most of us have played that, unless you're really young, because there's no app for it. Simon Says is, Simon says, pat your head, so okay, Simon said it. It was a very simple game, but it's so weird how in the church, Jesus says is a totally different game. If Jesus says something, you don't have to do it, you just have to memorize it. You study it, you memorize. You guys, it doesn't make any sense. A lot of the things we do. When he tells us to go out and make disciples, and how many people in our churches are actually making disciples? But they memorized it. When I tell my daughter, hey, Rach, go clean your room. She doesn't come back to me 2 hours later and go, I memorized what you said. You said, Rach, go clean your room. I can say it in Greek. My friends are going to come over and we're going to have a study on what it would look like if I cleaned my room. She knows better than that. And so why do we think we're going to come before the judge one day and quote everything that he said and talk about how much we know? It's just this black and white stuff. If I just started with Scripture, I'd go, here's what I would do. I would start making disciples.
Again, it's modeling, right? We know this as adults. As much as I don't like my parents' bad habits or whatever, I am growing up and being my parents, right? We've all seen the funny, what are those progressive commercials, right? We turn into our parents. This kind of happens, but let's model the good things. Like, let's model the things that we really want them to do. That's what I think has been very much missing in our, especially in our culture of law. Now, this isn't necessarily speaking to you, but I just look at my classmates. Like if I get together at a family reunion, so it's like they most of them don't go to church anymore, right? But their moms and dads all drag them to church. And I remember, because I went to confirmation class with a lot of them in a lot of different confirmation classes. They did all that, but they never did that for their kids. So their kids don't even have an inkling of where they're at with their faith life, because they didn't even get the same experience that they got from their parents. And again, we're not trying to unravel, and it's not like trying to, point blame or something along the lines of that. It's just more of a say, hey, let's start with this point, and let me be a little bit more open about where my faith is at, how I handle things when they happen to me, like my computer breaking down, or my truck burning up in a fire, or those types of things. I mean, it's just it looks different if you're handling it from a perspective of why you're handling it that way. Why did I not get upset in this particular situation? Well, because Jesus wouldn't want me to get upset in this situation. Well, maybe I reacted in the wrong way and yelled at the driver in the front of me because he wouldn't go, or whatever, right? So maybe that's not the best example I'm setting for my kids when I'm driving, those types of things. And so I say, hey, why don't we be that way? Because my daughter and I had a little bit, Elizabeth, so she would say, I think God's teaching you patience, Dad. So you see the play back and forth is a fun thing that you can kind of do. I think God is teaching you patience, right? I said, I never pray for patience, because that's what happens then, is God puts things in your life to make you more patient. And I really don't want to be patient, but maybe I need that, right, in my own life. So you see these kind of opportunities that can take place, that we can model this stuff back and forth. Any questions about anything up to this point? And again, some of these questions, like I said, I didn't get the chance to clean some of these up because this would just be too big of a group for us to do this. But you can kind of see like why, what are some of the vocations I do, and knowing, your vocation in that regard might be a little bit more helpful in that regard. All right, so I'm going to jump over to the last page. So it's the one that has the 6 point at the top. Okay. What is a mentor? So we're here to learn about what a mentor is, right? So
discipleship is so important because it is the fundamental task of the church. We have tended to interpret discipleship as a peripheral venture. We've tended to read the Great Commission as an evangelistic text, which is surprising when I say to people, it's not about evangelism. We built whole movements called the Church Growth Movement on the fact that it was evangelistic, go into the world, it's about evangelize everyone. So really, where does it say that? If you go back to the Great Commission, it says go out in all the world and make disciples, teaching them to obey all that I've commanded you. Now that doesn't sound like evangelism to me. That sounds like disciple making. So in other words, go out into all the world and make disciples. Well, get on with it. And the problem is that for most of us, we don't know how to do it. Oh, that's a sham. And what we say is that evangelism takes place in the context of discipleship, not the other way around. Evangelism is not sharing certain facts about Jesus as if we've got no obligation before or afterwards. But actually evangelism takes place in the context of a relationship that is called discipleship that can go a whole lifetime. And that we're constantly being evangelized anyway. I'm still being evangelized by the gospel right now. As I share it, I feel the resonance with it, you know what I mean? I'm constantly trying to engage this, and it's trying to engage me too. So I think it's important because it seems to me that Jesus gets into his people. If the fundamental definition of evangelism is that becoming more and more and more and more and more like Jesus every year, and letting Jesus live more and more and more his life in me, which I think gets to the heart of the issue, right? If that's what it's about, then it seems to be the most strategic thing you can possibly do in a church. And if you fail at that, you fail everywhere else. It's absolutely strategic.
Hopefully you're kind of understanding that just in a sense, because that was one of the things that, like I said, when I was going through that discipleship journey training, this Gary Small, the one that was talking about this, Gary Stump, sorry. Gary Stump tried to make sure that that point was made through to us. You know, I can read the Bible and I can grow in my faith by just reading the Bible. There's no question about that. That's not what's up for debate in this regard. Because he's talking about like the intellectual side of it, right? Just understanding, getting a deeper understanding. But what he did say is this, is that if you are discipling somebody else, there is no way you're not growing in your own faith. You can grow in your own faith by reading on your own or listening to praise music or listening to something like this. There's no question about that. But, you know, that can be happening. But what he was saying is that if you are in the act of discipling somebody else, then you are growing in your faith. There's no other way. I mean, that just naturally kind of happens. And he used the scripture. He was showing a couple passages in Philemon that really stress that forward too. Because, like, don't they say that even about teaching, right? Teaching helps you to understand what you're teaching better when you do that. It's just common. It's a common thread on what's going on in that whole process. So, all right, any questions about that video at all? All right, just so we haven't missed something, right? If we get to point C, primary disciple making is parents in the home, okay? Mentors walk alongside you to help in those types of areas. I get it. Sometimes it's just, you know, it's easier for that to come, you know, through from somebody else. I still get texts from kids that aren't in church, but they'll text me. 2 days ago, it was 3 o'clock in the morning that I got a text. And I'm perfectly fine with, you know, with that kind of thing happening. Lot of our kids that, you know, have drifted away from the church, or maybe they're going to church somewhere else, or I don't know, but, you know, they contact me back to do a wedding or something along the lines of this. That's the benefit of having a pastor that's been here 17 years. You can have those sort of things. But we also had Pastor Cal here, and he did a lot of things with the youth, and you know, him moving away, that was hard, right? I mean, some of you youth that liked Pastor Cal, right? I mean, didn't you? And had fun with him, and it was hard when he left. You know, those are hard kind of things that you can, you know, have to keep in mind. So we're also there for them. You know, we always want to be there for kids and those types of things. Like I said, I'd give my phone out to anybody that wants to be able to text me at any time or whatever. Always feel free to give me a call. They need more people like that in their life. You know what I mean? They need to have that sort of thing that's connected with them in that regard. So that's why this mentoring stuff is pretty important. I won't add, let's see, this is another good point. E, mentors are intergenerational as we learn from one another. There are several pastors in our church body now that they're doing away with their Sunday school, and everything is all intergenerational. Everything is intergenerational. I'm not opposed to that idea. Like I said, I hesitate to be the pastor that killed Sunday school at St. Stephen, but I do think we need to change the way we understand Sunday school. You know what I mean? This is not a place to just drop kids off for an hour while I go run an errand or something like that. We got to be involved in that education with them too. I really think if parents are not in with their students in Sunday school, they need to be in here because they got to model that. So you're modeling what you're doing, and that's what they're going to follow after. So that's my heavy law for tonight. What can we learn from the generations before us? You know, I mean, obviously we can learn a lot, and then also I think that there are a lot of older people that like really to be with younger people too, and like to hang out with them and learn those types of things. You guys can be mentors. You probably are mentors to a lot of kids that are here. I mean, I see a lot of interaction that goes on already anyway. This is just great stuff, for you to be involved with. So, all right, any questions on that? I think I've talked you guys to death. So at least that's the way I've felt. Just take those bottom bullet points that are there. I remember, like I said, Selena did a couple of different things. I think that sticky faith that they were talking about, she may have been actually drawing the information from that as an example. But there's hundreds of different things that you could do out there that could be connected in that regard. So, all right, any questions, thoughts, concerns? Anything along the lines of that? All right, well, I will close this with prayer, but then Jim's going to come up. I have to actually run, Jim, to get my family. They need a ride. So, but Jim, you're going to talk a little bit more about the high school stuff, right? Yeah, so I'll let Jim, talk about that kind of thing there. We're starting to probably have to get ramped up for thinking about NYG. I don't know. Fifth graders maybe it's just the sixth graders that'll be eligible for NYG. Is it probably just the sixth graders?
Sixth grade, I think by age.
By age, yeah, because they have to be confirmed. Yeah, so what last year was 22, so it'll be 25. So if they're confirmed by summer of 25, they'd be eligible to go to the National Youth Gathering. So I've always gone along with that, because I think that's a great experience for kids too. I mean, you got such phenomenal speakers that are there. If you can get your kids there to go to that, that's just absolutely fantastic for them to be able to see, 20,000 other youth their age that believe in Jesus. Because I know it's tough. I mean, you go to a school and you're alone. You don't have the same kind of stuff. So you don't have the same base. When I went to school, 95% of the kids were all going to church on Sunday morning. Whether they liked it or not, they were being dragged there. I don't think that is even that close. Last time I checked with somebody, it was a lot less than that. So I'm going to guess below 50%, if not lower, right? So, all right, well, let's pray. So, gracious Heavenly Father, we give you thanks for the privilege of being parents and for the privilege of being children. So, Lord, we ask that you would, again, strengthen both of those relationships, especially as it comes to following you. Keep giving us the wisdom that we need and the strength that we need and the support that we need for making this a good process, a healthy process. So we pray that you would send your Spirit into our parents' lives and into our kids' lives so that we see the importance of following Jesus in all that we say and all that we do. And we ask this for the sake of Jesus, our Savior. Amen.